I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross.
Welcome back, perfect peeps, to CodingCat.dev. This is Code with CodingCat.dev. See, usually when I have Brittany on, it's CodingCat.dev podcast, but
throwing
kind
things
of
off
floating
already.
all over. So I'll bring up the old banner today. We were talking about Snyk, not Snyk, not SNYK or any other thing you've heard of. It's Snyk, secure coding. And on the show, if this works, this has not been working. Let's see. Didn't work again today. So usually your display name would come up. We have Bryan Clark with us. I don't know why we're having this issue with StreamYard. I gotta put in a bug request. If you don't click show display names right when you start the show, you can't bring it back up. I don't know why.
Interesting.
Weird bug they have going on.
Yeah.
Brittany, you haven't been on since we have the new opening, do you?
No,
That's
I
fun.
haven't. Yeah.
That's really awesome. So we're going to chat with Bryan a little bit, get to know you a little more as people kind of float in. I want to go all the way back because my wife is a huge Disney nut. I want to know more about your time at the Walt Disney Company and how you got there, how you started.
Wow. Okay. Well, one, thanks for having me, and it's great to see you all. And that intro was fantastic, by the way. I was kind of bobbing my head with that.
Nice.
Sometimes
it's a little overpowering. I always get nervous.
No, I enjoyed it.
Okay,
I mean, at least for me. So I don't know for whatever that's worth. So yeah, I started at Disney to start my career. I was very fortunate for that. Where do I begin with that? How did I start there? Well, I'm originally from New York, and I actually went to college for a year there first and just didn't like it because I was basically still living at home, and I just didn't feel like I was getting the college experience, if you will, as a young kid just out of high school. And my now wife and I were like, oh, well, there's this school down in Florida that has a great engineering program, and then like for her degree, they had a great school there too. And so we're like, let's go check it out. And so once I knew I was going to come down here to Florida, that's when I was like, well, I love Disney, and I want that to be like my goal, to know that that's where I'm going to strive to go work there and become one of those Disney people. And how I got that was through an internship program. I went to one of the internship fairs at the school I attended. I didn't think I was going to get it, actually. I had done like an in-person little like informal thing at the fair that I thought was like okay, but I didn't feel really great about.
Yeah.
And then set up like a phone interview later on from that. Actually, it was while I was back home in New York, I got the call, and that interview I thought I bombed, but somehow it worked out, and I got the internship at Disney.
So is this part of the college program, or this is kind of a different thing?
Different. So yeah, the college program, for folks that don't know, that Alex is referring to, is like you can work in the parks while in college. I don't know. I didn't do that myself, so I don't have a lot of experience. But a lot of the colleagues that I worked with at Disney had gone through that, and then later turned into working in the IT department. And that's how I learned of that program. Actually, I didn't know of it prior to coming down here and then working at Disney. So it was separate. It was an internship for one of the teams in IT that had like a bunch of development teams within there, among other IT services, and it was with C# and .NET, and that was my first time ever doing that type of programming language, and yeah, that's how it started.
So that was your love of .NET began at that point.
Yeah, well, I attribute this to for real though. Like I did enjoy it because in schooling, in my classes, well, one, the catalog year I went for school, I went for computer engineering, and the reason I went for that was I wasn't sure if I wanted to do more software or hardware. I really enjoyed tinkering with hardware side of things, and so I was like, all right, let me go for computer engineering instead of like computer science,
Sure.
so that I can get like a balance of that. But that kind of backfired because I didn't know going into this that my school at the time, the catalog, the curriculum, if you will, too, was very heavily weighted on the engineering side of things and less on the software side of things. So I did a lot of electrical engineering coursework and didn't get as much training, if you will, or experience and education in the software side of things. A little bit here and there, like databases and operating systems and some object-oriented programming, that type of stuff. But in those classes, I was doing more C and Java,
Mhm.
that type of thing. So when I started at Disney, um, and I was doing C# and .NET, one, I feel very fortunate and grateful for the team that I was on. They were like they helped me be successful for one, and then two, uh, not no bias here or anything. I literally didn't know at the time, but I attribute much of my success because of the tooling around C# and .NET from
Yeah.
Microsoft made me successful, like Visual Studio.
Yeah,
So that's
totally.
helped out a lot there.
Was has it become, how do I ask this politely? It seems like Disney's IT corporation has like outsourced and like moved away from what they used to have. Have you noticed that, or do you keep up with people over there still?
I do keep up with people over there still. It's been a little while actually since I've touched base with them. That this is a good reminder for me to do that, and a reminder for other folks. It's always keep your
Reach
network
out.
in
Yeah.
touch and reach out to people. Um, Even when I was there was some of that going on because there's just such a demand for I mean, as you can imagine, Disney is a huge company and there's a lot of different aspects to it. So they don't have enough people on hand to do all of the uh, software needs that they have all the time. So naturally, they're gonna outsource some of that. But yeah, so even when I was there was some of that going on. Whether that has increased or decreased over the of since I've been there, I'm not entirely sure. I haven't
Sure.
heard anything about that, but it's
Yeah,
definitely
people
feasible.
people ask me all the time. So my wife's dead set. She wants to work for Disney. She doesn't care in what capacity. We're moving there as soon as my son graduates in 3.5 years. No, less than 3.5 now. And they're always like, "So you're gonna go work at Disney too?" And I'm like, "No." Like, I have no interest in working in their IT department just from the horror stories I've heard and like quick layoffs and stuff like that. So I'm really happy to hear like you had a great experience and you're able to kind of learn a lot through that experience too. So that's really cool.
Yeah, yeah. It was good. I mean, there's definitely pros and cons to each company. One of the big things that I've realized for any of these big companies that now that I've worked at a couple of them is just reorgs are the thing that kind of
Yeah,
that's what usually is the catalyst for things to go in a way that you just don't enjoy it anymore. So and
100%.
that's definitely something that took a toll on me while I was there. But I had originally planned to be a lifer, what they call like a lifer at Disney, where and I had an opportunity to be one of those people that have like a 50-year anniversary type of situation because I started out so young and
Yeah,
early on in my career there.
yeah.
But then just other opportunities came up that I was like, you know what? I'm not going to just stay here just because I want to reach some arbitrary milestone.
All right.
That's not necessarily
Yeah.
good for me in my career.
But you get
Um,
those cool badges, right? Like,
you do. It is there is definitely something to be said about that to
yeah,
see, you as a younger person at the company, seeing people there like that, it gives you confidence that, like, this is a good company to work for.
cool.
It's that type of thing, and to see them get rewarded to some degree, whether you count that as a reward or not, but that recognition at least for their service for that long and that dedication, it's kind of a nice thing, right?
100%. Yeah, it's amazing. Longevity in companies and just the culture around it, at least in the tech space, it's really hard. People tend to bounce around a lot, but we still love Disney. I don't know on the tech scene if I'll be in there or not, but we are headed back in three weeks, I think. So another trip down. Our trip in January kind of got a little messy, so I decided I would forego my normal NCAA March Madness and go to Disney with my wife again. So
Well, you can still enjoy that while you're here.
I know
So
we've got places lined up, and I always do like fancy fries for mine. And so we're going to oh gosh, we're going to Canada. I can't remember the restaurant name there. Apparently they have some pretty smoking fries.
they
So
do. They do, they
we'll,
do.
we'll jump in
Well,
on
if
that.
you're
At
at
Epcot, you're
if it
talking about not
Yeah,
like
sorry,
Canada, the actual
not actual
country.
Canada.
Yeah, that's true, yeah, good
In
clarification.
Epcot, yeah. Yeah. So when I first learned of Bryan was your developer experience at Microsoft, though. So, like, what made the shift at that point? Like, why did you kind of get on this train that we all love called developer advocacy?
Yeah, well, so pretty typical that you'll hear from most people in this type of role is they didn't know about this type of role prior to getting into it, and that's kind of the situation I was in too, where while I was at Disney, I found myself drawn to doing more like lunch and learn type of presentations to the team. We had an internal conference that I would present at, And then outside of that, I was going to local meetups and code camp type of things, and like getting my feet wet and some experience with just doing more of this whole situation of I learned something new and I want to share what I learned with other people so that they can maybe accelerate that process, and kind of teaching. Like I found I mean, I originally was going to go to school for teaching, for like to become a math teacher, and then I just had this love for computers, and that's why I kind of diverted a bit. But so
Nice.
this was like a way I found myself drawn to being able to do both in a sense. Um, and then this opportunity came up where with Microsoft, where they were starting over. Like Microsoft has gone through several iterations of DevRel, Dev Advocacy,
Yep.
evangelism,
In a
and they
lot
were
of different
starting.
areas too, right? I mean, there's so many areas at Microsoft. It's crazy.
Oh yeah, you think Disney's massive, Microsoft's right there, if not more, right?
Yep.
Um, so yeah, this opportunity came up where they were kind of starting from a clean slate and bringing people on, and through connections and networking and that type of thing, I was able to um, pursue that as like a full time. I was like, okay, well, I'm doing this on the side on my own time. I really love my job at Disney. I love my leadership that I was working with. They really took me under their wing, and I just felt I was in a great place. But I also felt like this is an opportunity I can't pass up because, I want to do that full time and see what that experience is like and see if I really enjoy it. And that's how that started essentially.
Nice.
Yep.
That's really cool. Yeah, I watched many of your videos for a while there, especially around like VS Code and Visual Studio. I think was more popular at that time. So good stuff.
That's great to hear. I'm very
All right,
flattered.
have I quizzed you enough? Do the people know everything they need to know about Bryan?
I mean, there's a lot to know, I guess. It's,
I see a
but yeah, I think
guitar in the background. Some music hobbies you want to
no,
mention?
that's all for show, honestly. For real, I'm not even kidding. Um,
Okay.
it's
That's
actually for me, it's a reminder of one of those things where you have ambition and what just like this the ever thing where like your attention goes to focus on something and then that just fades away and you kind of so to me it's like a reminder of like a failure in the sense of I had this ambition to learn to play guitar, started while I was in college like a little bit, and then that just faded away, and I can't play anything on there. I'm lucky if I can strum the strings type of thing.
I just offered my son.
That's to fit in.
What's that?
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I just offered Oliver, my son, to I was like, I'll buy us a guitar and we can learn together. He's like, nah, I don't want that. I was like, oh, okay.
Ouch, yeah.
Stick with
I
your
was gonna
clarinet then.
say it's to fit in with all the other developer advocates that all have like the musical backgrounds. Like
Yes,
pretty
exactly.
much everybody in coding has like a musical background of some sort. It's a strange phenomenon that keeps happening, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of amazing.
That is super interesting. I have I still have it, but it's broken because it fell over, a saxophone. So when I was in grade school, I was in jazz band
Nice.
and I really enjoyed it, but I stopped it because I'm not a morning person. And when I got to high school, they wanted us, and I played sports too. So when I got to high school, I didn't want to have to go before school to go to band practice, then do school all day, and then go to some sports practice afterwards. That's like I was just like, that's too much. So I dropped it. And like I kinda regret that a little bit because, as a gift, my parents actually found my, like, middle school teacher's family or whatever. They were trying to sell. He had passed away, unfortunately, and the family was, like, trying to, get rid of some of the stuff, and they were like, "Oh," my parents found that out, and they ended up getting the saxophone from them, and I tried playing it, like, many years later, and it's just
Yeah.
like, "Honk, honk," like, I can't I have no feel for it anymore, and I feel so dumb. But, I
Oh,
have it, as a sense of, like, maybe one day I'll take lessons again for both the guitar and the saxophone to get back into it, so
That's pretty awesome. I did the same thing I played clarinet for years and I picked one up and it was like,
well, reed
oh my
instruments I
gosh.
feel like are just harder too. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I guess
yeah.
brass is hard too. Like you have to put
Did I
your
say
mouth has
clarinet?
to
I
go
meant
like a
cornet.
certain way.
Sorry. Trumpet is what I played, folks. Cornet.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd think it'd be like riding a bike, but it's not.
I
It is
know.
not.
This is a crash on your bike every time.
Right.
All right, so
Um
we kind of did all of your background, and the reason we're here today is Snyk, and you got started at Snyk just for fun. You wanted some more to do. What happened there?
Well, I think that ties back into my past experience too. So when I was at Disney, I had found while I was working on that first team actually that I joined with, we would have like we had a security team that were like I would call the security heads. They knew everything and everything about IT security and you know, a bit about application security, and they would like basically come to our team and say, "Hey, are you compliant with this checklist?" And they would have all these words on it, and I'd be like, "I don't know what that is." Yes, maybe I can't, you know, and they'd be like, and you know, whatever would go on from there.
Yep.
And then so I took it upon me. Well, my family background of all military police people, and like so security has kind of been driven into me growing up. And so I was like, well, this is my way in my own fashion to, you know, pull in that a little bit of that background and history in my family into what I'm doing now. And so I was like, I'm going to take it upon me because no one else on the team really was like showing interest or initiative with that. I was like, this is interesting to me. Let me dive deeper into this. And I became this like liaison between the security team and our dev teams.
Cool.
And so I took it upon me to like educate myself, take courses, learn more about application security in particular, and then helped us bridge this gap between what that security team was telling us we needed to comply with and how we as developers can, you know, fulfill those needs that we have as a company in the applications that we're building. So that led to like significant progression at Disney in my career because of that. And then, you know, you take that the aspect of I want to teach and my passion around security. And so when I was at Microsoft, I had intentions to go that route, but it just didn't flow that way. Things just organically went in a different direction, as you know, with VS Code and that type of thing, which I still love and advocate for to some degree. But Snyk was this opportunity of like mashing those two things together, that background and history. And I was like, sign me up. Let's check this out. And I was using Snyk prior to working there. Like I had set it up in my own open source projects. I had back when GitHub Actions first came out, I had set up their first GitHub action actually
Oh,
for
wow.
them. And then they contacted me and said, "Hey, we're going to actually take over this. So if you can tell," and I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." You know, so I put a little thing in the README, like go to the official one, not this one, that type of thing. Um, and that's kind of how that initiated.
That's
And
really
then
cool.
so they were hiring and expanding their DevRel team and jumped on that opportunity.
So for folks that are always trying to get a new job, that's how you do it. Go jump in an open source repo, do something for the community, and someone will notice. I guarantee it.
Absolutely. Yeah, doing things that you're passionate about and, like, making that visible is extremely important and will create opportunities.
Absolutely.
100%. All right, let's take a look at Snyk. So here is, I'm hoping I have this set up right. We changed it right before we got on. Look at that. All three of us, we're good.
Mhm.
So this is Snyk's website. The first thing to point out, in my opinion, is their dope logo. So this
Oh, yeah.
crazy dog, like you're not gonna want to break into their security. Let's just zoom in a little bit here. You know?
Actually, all that explanation as to why I joined Snyk, you can just throw that out the window. It's because of the branding. I'm a sucker for really great branding and awesome swag, and I just wanted to get their swag.
That's really good to know. That's why I've been preaching at work. We need to up our branding game. All right.
I've been preaching we need to get, like, a public merch store for people to, like kinda like how GitHub does or other
Oh
companies
yeah.
where you can just buy merch.
You don't
People
have
love
swag?
our branding.
Got Snyk? What's up with that?
It's just not there. You're preaching to the choir in that. I'm
Swag
definitely
stores are
pushing
like
for it.
where it's at.
Yeah.
So you can see here it covers a lot of different languages, a lot of different IDEs. Brian's going to walk us through at least a couple of different repos, since most of the folks that follow CodingCat, your JavaScript, TypeScript oriented web folks. We do dive into like containers and stuff like that, and the CI/CD side of the house and testing and things like that. So we'll see where we get today. This is probably a little less traditional than we're used to. Like we're not gonna probably put it into a web app, but we're gonna start off looking at CodingCat and then dive into a not so great repo as well. So first, I was thinking for folks, and I don't know if this makes sense. Should I like uninstall Snyk and like go back through it? I thought it was kind of a good process, but I don't know. What do you think?
No, I think it's fine. I mean,
Okay.
generally speaking, the installation process or setup process is
Pretty
straightforward.
straightforward.
I feel like you
Yeah.
sign up for an account at Snyk, you can have a free account. The free account gives you a pretty generous threshold in terms of like how many things you can do. Especially one thing that we were talking prior to this all starting. Me personally, on my personal account, I have a separate one for work that gives me all the bells and whistles that Snyk offers, but my personal one doesn't get any added benefit as a result of me working there. I just want to call that out. But the reason I'm calling that out too is I've been using my personal one on open source public repositories of my own for years and have yet to reach that free tier threshold limit to where I would have to pay anything so far. But if you have like private repositories, that type of thing, that starts adding up, and then you might reach that limit much quicker in that regard. So you sign up for an account with Snyk for free. You hook it into, like, if you're just getting your feet wet with it, you hook it into like a public repository on GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket. We have integrations to all those three, and then you could try it out and test it out that way without feeling like you have to pay for anything right off the bat.
Nice.
So, and then for me, like you were just talking about, Alex, I set up the extension in Visual Studio Code to help me so that I'm catching these things before they get into production while I'm in the midst of getting things set up and working. The Snyk extension is telling me, hey, take a look at that. You're actually, this happened to me actually recently, but we can go into that story as we get there when you see fit.
Yeah, I love it. So basically, once I opened up like CodingCat.dev, I can open the extension. You have to give it access to like folders essentially to scan. So a little security piece there. If I run this again, let's see if it actually go to output. There we go. So there's just kind of Snyk running through. It actually like outputs all of the things it's checking and where it's checking them and the files and stuff like that. So really good job. Like you can see exactly what's going on. And the cool part, at least so far, was there's no open source security issue. Looks like a little security problem here. Let's see if we can take a peek.
And the L there doesn't mean that like L as in loss, as one might think. It means there's different severities of vulnerabilities that Snyk categorizes. There's critical, high, medium, and low, which is the L there. So what that essentially is saying is that it's great, like you said, Alex. You don't have a significant amount of vulnerabilities for one in total. You just have one potential vulnerability here, and of those, it's the lowest severity possible. So you're doing a fantastic job with what you got with CodingCat. Yeah, you're safe.
It's a pretty static site, folks. So don't like preach to whoever. I'm not that great of a coder. So the cool part here, though, is like normally when you're looking at code, you don't think about this side of it, and this kind of keeps it ever present in my mind. That like when you're going through these things, like we all run like npm install, and you get to like there's some warnings, there's some vulnerabilities, but this is kind of looking at the code side of it as well. Is that the correct way to like express that, Bryan?
Yeah, no, I think you hit it spot on. The nice thing with Snyk is, well, you bring it back up, right? Back to the top of what you said. When you're developing, you're not really always, unless you're someone like me that's been ingrained in you, you're not necessarily always thinking about, all right, what's the security aspect of this? Your goal at the end of the day is provide value to your end users, and that you're building out that functionality, and what the end result is it working or not? That's what your users care about. That's what you as a developer are caring about, right? And that's what you're measured on too. And so with Snyk, what's nice is it's kind of taking on a little bit of that responsibility for you to bring that to the top of your mind, at least, and alert you to these vulnerabilities that could be presented or be introduced by your code or by open source dependencies that you're relying on, and the vulnerabilities that those are bringing into your code base. And then a couple other areas, like if you're using containers, right? And maybe the containers are bringing in some vulnerabilities as part of whatever base image you're using, or some of the dependencies within that. We can talk about that in a little bit. And last but not least, a little bit outside of my wheelhouse as a developer, but if you're doing infrastructure as code, Snyk also has some capabilities around that to alert you of vulnerabilities that are being introduced in that avenue.
And so that's like your Terraforms, your Pulumis, like there's probably some other AWS CDK. And we can go down a list and it covers all of them.
Yep.
So let's talk about like, I get this error, right? And what do I do with it now? I'm like, okay, that's cool. It's low. We should probably fix this. I put it on our GitHub issue list, and someone finally cracks into it. Like, what do you do from this screen to actually like affect anything at this point?
Well, for one, what you just said is leaps and bounds probably beyond what most developers would do, because you know what they're going to do, right? They're just going to say, whatever, ignore it, move on, and go back to what they're focusing on.
Yeah, it's low, right? Okay.
Yeah. So once you get past that, or get to a point where maybe your leadership is like, hey, we need to knock out these vulnerabilities, you're getting measured on this, which that's a whole nother story of like instilling that in the whole life cycle of a project. But yeah, once you start doing this, one of the things that I try to bring out in this when you start looking at it is learning more about it, right? Because one of the going back to my story I was telling about before with Disney, I didn't know. Like I had to take the initiative myself to figure out what these terms were. And the security team, no fault to them really, but they were hesitant to educate the development teams about hacking and like vulnerabilities and that type of thing because
Mhm.
they're worried that maybe these I mean it's really kind of, if you think about it from a broader perspective, it's counterintuitive. Why would an employee want to hack their own company that's paying their paycheck, right? But that's their concern, is that they're going to do something malicious with that information now, maybe build something into their software or whatever. So there's this resistance to teach the development teams from the people that are security. And then I think there's some of it where some security folks are more going back to what we were talking about before, like they're IT focused and not
Yeah.
so much application development focused. So maybe they don't have the knowledge or background to create that connection between the development team. So the reason I'm bringing all that out is what I feel proud of that Snyk does is we're not just alerting you to these vulnerabilities, we're providing information so that you as a developer can understand why this is a problem. Because that was the thing that I struggled with, was like, why do I care? What is cross-site scripting and why do I care about it?
Yeah.
Like, what does that do
Right.
to my application? And so when something like this comes up, getting the grasp of like what the actual pain can come from this thing, what is the actual malicious thing that somebody can do with a cross-site scripting vulnerability, then that's like, oh, wow, I really do need to focus on this. I really do
Yep.
need to be worried about this because I don't want that to happen. Because like if that happens in our application, that could ruin us as I don't want to be responsible for that, right? Like my
Right.
company going down because of a vulnerability that I allowed happening, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things I would say to start out with is as a developer, getting yourself acquainted with, if you're not already, with some of these things to understand what the vulnerabilities are that are popular out there. And one of the resources I always call out is OWASP, Open Web Application Security Project, although I think that acronym stands for something slightly different now. They've changed the name a bit, but it's still OWASP. That was the resource that helped me significantly. OWASP with a P at the end there. OWASP.org, if you go to the website there. They have like the OWASP top 10 lists that tell you about the top 10 web application vulnerabilities that you need to be aware of. And that's how I educated myself originally. Snyk is doing that in conjunction with the information that OWASP provides, to educate you directly in, like with the extension, directly in VS Code. So you don't have to do that context switching of like jump into the browser website, OWASP, learn over there, come back and try and, that type of thing. So that's the starting point for me, is as a developer, is getting yourself in that mindset of understanding why it's important. And the way you do that is learning about what these terms are and what these different vulnerability types are. And that way you can be like, okay, this is significantly impactful to me and the work that I'm doing. That'll be my motivation to take it the next step, which is, all right, how do I start addressing these things? Right.
Totally. And then, so like from here, are you saying like if I click read more, this is probably the best way to start to learn about that?
Yeah. Like for instance, I don't insufficient post message at the top, it tells you what that vulnerability is. If you
Yep.
go back up, insufficient post message validation. Like to me, even right off the top, like I don't know exactly what that means, right? And the details below, use your code to kind of explain that. It's using that context to explain it a bit better, so that you can see what that relation is to your project. And
Cool.
so in this case, these details are saying the post message, like if you just allow any post message that's coming in, I'm assuming on like a WebSocket or an event listener in this case, you don't know who the source is that's providing that. And then what you do with that data that's sent in that post message that you're receiving could potentially be malicious and try
Yeah.
to break out of the context of that you intend it to be used within.
Nice. Yeah,
So
that totally makes sense.
is it because there's no check around the fetch, like where you're fetching it from in your actual code?
I think what it's saying is the origin it's coming from
On
should
your like
yeah.
search worker TS though.
So you mean like over in here?
Yeah, in your code block there. Is it because you're not checking like the await fetch origin? That payload
I
origin?
think it's actually the call that's coming in or the data that's coming in. We're not checking where that originated from. I could be wrong though, but
No, that sounds about right. Like, this is completely blind, like, thing that we're jumping in for everybody that's watching right now. So that looks like what it's intended to be. And to get further confirmation on that, that's where this part comes in, Alex, that you're showing, where they show a couple of open source examples where this thing had an issue, this type of vulnerability, and how they addressed it. So in this case, for that context, they have this server address, server path, and it's double checking the message.sender and origin, like Brittany was just talking about too. Like, so
I
I
think
think
if
she's
you
onto
were
something
to
there where if you validate that payload origin, which is coming from that event.data, that should address that low severity issue that you're seeing right now.
yeah, I think if we were to put this in and we can try this out, I don't know how well this will work, but these all need to be like this. Is it payload?
Yeah, I think you pulled it out, you deconstruct it into the payload variable. And so you payload.sender maybe, or if that is on there. Is that a property on that payload?
Mm-mm.
I think it'd be at the top level. So something like yeah. So we bring in message.sender.
So
It
that's your
should
event. Event.sender should have worked.
it yes, exactly. That's
Okay.
kind of event.sender is not a thing. So
Is that like old code that's maybe gotten updated and doesn't have that property anymore?
let's see.
Well, my next question is, what type of event
Word.
listener is this? Is this a WebSocket event listener? Is, that type of thing? So it's assuming in the example that it's a browser-based,
Right.
where I'm seeing that window.add event listener, it's like an event listener just in the browser on the page, right?
Right, exactly.
But typically, like with a message, when you're looking for a message, I'm assuming here in your context of CodingCat is maybe it's like a WebSocket message that you're looking for.
I actually don't even know.
Okay.
Well, you're
Uh,
fetching, so it's on the window. It's on the
yeah,
browser side.
it's gotta be in our search, I would assume. So yeah. So I think that is on CodingCat where we get the search box like this.
Okay. Yeah.
So if we
Is that from
do all the
Algolia
Bryan-
still?
no, this actually passes down now. So we build this each time. But that is kind of interesting. So event.data. I'm surprised there's not event.origin or something coming in. So
There's
There's
origin.
origin right there. Yeah,
There
check
we
that
go.
out.
So that should represent this one at least over here.
Yeah.
And that might be sufficient enough in itself right there. Just knowing, well, once you update that
server address to
what you
whatever
expect it
it
to
needs
be.
to be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So if
and
it's
that would be interesting because it's usually something like window dot like
So you're destructuring payload and then grabbing payload.origin. What's the difference between event.origin and payload.origin?
my guess is those are the same.
So should those be equal there? Is that your check?
Possibly payload origin. Yeah, maybe.
I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know exactly where you want to go with this. I'm down to go down this path where
We don't
wanna
need
run
to.
it.
We don't need to. That's why I keep
Okay, okay.
kind of half backing back out. It's
I
like
got you. Okay.
if this were fixed, we should be good.
Yeah. The idea, though, that you're getting from this, that I think both of you are understanding, is you want to validate that. You want to make sure it's
Right.
coming from the place that you expect it, and it's not somebody else that's kind of pushing that event to your website in some form or fashion, right? That
Yep.
can then do something nefarious from there, right? Or malicious.
Yeah. So some sort of SQL injection or something could be occurring that you don't want.
Yeah.
Or
Well,
from another
in this
site.
context, is if it's in the browser, maybe that's a way that they can get some type of cross-site scripting vulnerability in there and start extracting data out of there from your users or whatever it may be that somebody might be intending to do.
Luckily, this one's a low one, so things are okay.
Yeah.
Ish. No configuration issues. That's kind of an interesting one that it can pick that up. Is that coming from like different applications? So like ours is we have Svelte application. Is that the configuration it's talking about?
No, I believe, and I might be wrong on this because they're actively making improvements to the VS Code extension, and I
Okay.
hadn't noticed that prior to this actually. But I'm thinking like infrastructure as code configuration potentially.
That makes sense. Yep.
Because that's normally what's there. So we have the, like we were talking about before, there's open source security, there's code security, which we were just looking at, that Snyk will analyze, and then there's infrastructure as code configuration security that we would scan for in VS Code. The container side of stuff you do separately outside of the extension. So that's where I'm like, where did that IAC stuff go? And I think maybe they just renamed it into configuration issue.
Configuration. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we don't currently have any IAC, so that's good.
There you go.
And then it looks like we have a medium going on. Uh-oh.
So this area, now this is getting a little bit in a gray area in the sense of like whether this is a security related thing. It's more about code quality.
Yeah.
And it's like a nice to have thing that Snyk is offering through the extension. So these aren't, even though it has those severity type of labels to them, I wouldn't treat them in the same way as the security side of things, severities like high, medium, low, that type of thing.
True.
So
That makes
this
sense.
is more about like, hey, here's some general best practices for the programming language that you're using that we noticed and we want to call out to you that will save you from some of the typical things that could go bad with not following this best practice, right?
Cool. Yeah, that's fair. That makes sense. And now we're going to show you a really bad repo that Bryan hooked us up with. So you're probably way more familiar with it. So
I really like that it gives you like the code smells, like so you can like figure out like your own code is broken and fix those issues too.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's cool.
I like that it reminds me of how bad of a developer I am.
That's a great way of saying that.
You're a better developer though, like that
I
if you're paying attention to it and fixing the issues.
For sure, for sure.
So this is a pretty standard looking Node.js. We've got app.js, we've got a package.json, and there's some issues occurring according to Snyk. So let's start, minimize all of these. Here's our open source security issues. I don't know if you typically go one by one through these. Is that how you usually roll with these?
No, not typically. There's a lot. I mean, you can definitely spend a lot of time going. Yeah, we. How long do we have for the rest of this podcast here? You know,
we got like 45 minutes. You can take your time.
So yeah, we don't. Well, that's definitely not enough for all of these. I'll tell you that much.
Don't you just do npm like outdated or fix or something?
You could do that. I mean, for those that have a keen eye, a lot of these dependencies, for one, are intentionally old versions of npm packages that are known to have vulnerabilities in them. So again, this is a demo project for people that are curious watching at home or at work. It's intentional so that we can demonstrate and show examples of these vulnerabilities in action. And in fact, you could even potentially run it and hack it. We can do some of that too.
Ooh,
although typically I spin up, this is one thing that might be a friction point, but I think we might be able to work around it, where I would spin up the database as a container, a MongoDB database, but I think we can avoid that and just run it with like npm, run npm install, npm start type of thing.
Sure.
But that's B1, if you want to go down that route.
says hack it.
Hey, B1. Hey, B1, good to see you. Familiar name. And I see May in the chat too. SMC May.
Yep.
Great to see
May's
familiar
got
names.
a good clap rolling out there.
Yeah.
I like this t-shirt picture.
Where the heck is Springs?
Heber Springs?
Yeah.
I don't know. You tell us. Where is
it?
It looks like Arkansas.
Oh, is that the actual image? Nice.
I think so.
I like it. Maybe we'll get more. Okay. So where should we roll with it? You want me to spin some things up, start Node.js?
If you'd like to, we can try that. And while it's like npm install, go get a cup of coffee, we can talk through some stuff too.
I have decent internet. We should be okay.
Okay. Oh wow, yeah, that's going pretty
fast. It
fast.
would be faster if you use PNPM, but
yeah, there is that. Or it'd be faster if we use Bun.
Yeah,
have you all tried Bun yet?
Usually I go. I like to go Bun and then PNPM, but now I've flip-flopped because I feel like PNPM caught up. So
okay,
I don't know why.
Nice.
So this is npm's telling me we got all kinds of problems, which Snyk has already told me. So where do we roll from here?
So one of the places I go off the start with this is if you actually, let's open up the project more view in the Explorer view. Yeah. And so like maybe open up, let's say app.js for now. And you'll notice that it's like highlighted in red. And this is where the VS Code, the Snyk VS Code extension is coming into play, where it's going to let you know in your code. This is part of Snyk Code product that we have. It's going to let you know issues in your code that you might be introducing, because that's the one that's top of mind, that top of the iceberg type of picture that we like to use to explain this stuff. When I started out, that was the first thing that came to mind when my leadership would say, hey, we need to worry about the security of this application. I think, okay, my code, right?
Yeah.
So that's where we're starting out here. And in this case, it's saying on line 42 that session, you have a hard-coded secret, and you don't want to do that, right? You want to use something like environment variables or something like that.
Yep, for sure.
Yep.
So throwing like a .env in here, a lookup of some kind would kind of fix this issue.
Yeah. And if you
Okay.
hover over it, you should get more information there, which you can read through it. Or if you go back to the Snyk extension view, you can open up that side panel for it. Actually, I wonder, maybe if you click on, what's the best way to find that specific one? Yeah, there you go. You got it.
Yep.
That way you can find more information about it, why it's a problem, and how other people.
I either lost Bryan or I lost all of you. I'm sorry.
Oh, something is happening.
Bryan, I think maybe we lost you a little bit. If you can hear us, you might want to try jumping out of Chrome and back in or something. In the meantime, we have some updates. We got acknowledgement that it is in Arkansas, so that's good. We also have Greg Miller. Been a minute, Greg. Nice to see you. I've got this installed on my GitHub, but I have not had deep interactions with it. Glad to see you're walking through it. I'm glad we're walking through it, so that's great. There's some more backstory on the picture here. So backstory on the picture, another streamer is always talking about KKONA. Is this like a camping thing I don't know about? And that place truly is KKONA. What does this acronym mean?
Isn't that the?
Am I back?
You are back.
Okay.
Yes, you're back.
Sorry.
No worries.
All good. All good. So we updated a few things there, Arkansas, KKONA. Anyways, so we were hitting the session thing, and Bryan was about to walk us through kind of what we can do to alleviate the issue here.
Yeah, so that panel that opens up directly in VS Code, like we saw before, is going to explain what the issue is, why it's important, and then at the bottom give you those examples again from open source on how other people address it. So as you can see, using an environment variable instead of hard coding the secret like that is the best approach with that.
Nice.
That really actually brings me to that story I was alluded to earlier on a project that I've been working on recently, one of my own projects. I had hard coded. So you both are familiar with streaming, probably familiar with OBS then. And OBS has a WebSocket server that I was trying to communicate with, and it has a password on it. And because I'm just spinning up this project, it's in a private repository, I had hard coded the secret for the WebSocket server connection in my code. And because I'm in DevRel and that type of thing, a lot of times I'll have different profiles in VS Code where I have Snyk enabled versus not enabled. And I didn't have Snyk enabled. It didn't alert me to that. And I committed that code to my repo. And I was like, man, there it is. I'm the security person. And I went and made that mistake. And had I had Snyk enabled, I would have caught that and probably prevented.
We might get there, but is there, because you talked about GitHub Actions and things like that, like is there a level that once you try to push something like that, you can run prior to even I think it's on push, it'll check instead of like after the codes actually hit your repo?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's things that you can set up locally, like with Husky and that type of thing, pre-commit hooks, so that on your local machine you can do that and enable this. I mean, Snyk doesn't have something like that natively locally at this point in time that I'm aware of. But when, let's say you didn't have that locally or something set up where you configured it on your own using Snyk to prevent that from happening, you can use GitHub Actions, Snyk GitHub Actions, or whatever source control management system you might be using, where you can set up those pre-commit hooks to say, hey, we don't want to check that in actually, or commit that to the remote repository.
Sure.
Because it has that type of thing, and it'll alert you to that. or at least it'll let you know that it's there, so that if
Yeah.
you don't catch it locally and you see it there, you're like, okay, I got to rotate that key or whatever
Yep.
it may be because
And
it was in the
it
commit.
probably runs like a pipeline in CI in GitHub or wherever you're at and shows you if that's a vulnerability, and then you can't merge if that happens, like blocks
100%.
your merge. Right.
Yep.
Is there a difference between like what Dependabot checks from GitHub and then what level Snyk would check?
I would say yes. I mean, how do I want to phrase this? Because I don't want to talk out of turn a little bit. Because in some cases, GitHub those types of things are competing with Snyk. And to me, the way I've always viewed it, and this is me as Switzerland neutral talking here, like I've personally not used Dependabot or relied on Dependabot that much, or at least my perspective on it was, how do I keep my packages just up to date so that I'm not constantly like behind? So that's been my experience with it, but it does have some capabilities where it can do that. Now, one of the key differences that, like for instance, npm, when you run npm install and it's showing you those vulnerabilities, that by default is set to show you vulnerabilities in all of your dependencies. Meaning, in this context, you have your main dependencies that you would rely on in production, and then you have your dev dependencies. And for me, I don't want to necessarily care about the dev dependencies and what vulnerabilities might be in there, because that's not what's being used in production, and therefore where my users might be vulnerable to that type of thing. I want to first focus on the things that will be a problem in production before I worry about what's a problem on a dev machine locally that I'll just wipe out anyway, or that type of thing, right? So that's one difference, like with npm, to call out there. But yeah, when it comes to Dependabot, I can't speak to it as knowledgeable as some other folks, and I don't want to do either Snyk nor GitHub and Dependabot injustice by saying, oh, it does this or it doesn't do that,
Yeah.
because of like the way I've used it in the past, right? I've always looked at it and used it in the past as like something that just helps me keep my packages up to date. But I realize and recognize that there is more to it than that.
That makes sense. I was
Cool.
just curious if there was something specific you knew, but thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So here's just since we were talking about the GitHub Actions integration stuff, so plenty of things out here: Golang, Gradle, Maven. Here's the node action for GitHub. So this is kind of an example of how you would plug those in. And I don't know, we might get to this too, but I'll let you keep walking us through.
Yeah. One other quick note on regarding like other options. What generally speaking, like when it comes to companies, they don't typically want to take this route. But like if you're working on side projects, open source projects, what I've always advised people is like use as much as like there was a point in time before I was even working at Snyk where there was, I don't know if you both maybe remember the Node security project, and they had a CLI tool, NSP, which is actually what's incorporated in npm nowadays. And so it was like that project and Snyk that were like the two ones that I was at least aware of as a developer before working at Snyk. And like whenever I was on live streams or something like that, I would be like, hey, use both, because they have different databases that they were managing of what vulnerabilities they caught versus Snyk caught, or vice versa. You want to make sure you're secure. And if using both means that that's going to help, then do that, right? Like that's the
Sure.
end goal, right?
Yeah.
So you know, again, that's my advice with people is like use what you see fit and what's going to help you reach that end goal of feeling like confident in the security of your application.
Yeah.
And I obviously believe that would be Snyk in this case.
Yeah. Cool.
Yep.
So kind of walking through code examples, do you want us to try to like spin this up, or what's next steps with this?
Let's see, because if we can get to a point where we spin this up now, again, keep in mind, this is a very like really a clunky app. I don't know how far we're going to get necessarily, or if let me put it this way. We're going to run into issues and errors of getting it running.
Okay.
Like that. But I think we can ignore that and still go to like, cause it's trying to connect to a database. I think we can ignore that and still open up the application on the local host in that port, which that's the database one. You ignore that one. It should be like localhost 3000.
There is a question in the chat.
3001. Yes, go ahead.
I think I can show this. Yep. Will Snyk notify us if something that should be a secret is exposed in a repo before a commit? And I think if you have that extension installed, then you should see that, correct?
Yeah, I think the other piece that we talked about, which we've used this, Brittany, a long time ago, if you have Husky as well. So that runs pre push, not necessarily commit. So it'll
You
commit
can run
locally.
pre or post with Husky, but however you have it set up, like you can run something before commit that would check that. But does Snyk specifically do that? And I know it showed us that in the extension panel. So if we were watching the extension panel, then we should be able to see that with Snyk.
Yeah, so Snyk, the extension, is one way to combat that, I would say. So, and that just means, though, you have to, as a developer, build up the habit of looking at either the problems panel in VS Code or opening up the Snyk extension. And the reason I say those two areas is because, yes, it does show you in your code, like Alex sees on line 42 there, but that's just for the vulnerabilities that are introduced through your code. We've yet to really get into the vulnerabilities that are introduced through open source dependencies that you have just yet. And for that, you need to be either looking at your package JSON or those other areas, the problems panel or the VS Code extension panel in there.
Does that say it's running on 3001? Do you have something running on 3000?
It does say 3001, but I don't think it's actually running.
Oh, it's not. Yeah.
Okay, so then it might be because it needs the database to be spun up, and I don't want to put you through the process of maybe spinning up building a container for that, like a MySQL database or a MongoDB database.
Sure.
In which case,
so they should put a is it Postgres, the one that you can do like locally in the repo? Like just add one of those to the repo.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
I think like MySQL, you actually have a Docker file. I wonder if I could just Docker compose and off we go.
If you want to, that's fine. Yeah. Let's give it a shot.
Let's give it a go.
So one of the reasons why it would be great if we can get to that point is then we can actually step through like hacking this application and seeing the problems with it. But nonetheless, folks we have plenty of either me or other folks at the company where we have recordings on the Snyk YouTube account where you can see us going through this type of stuff. And then two, if you want to try it yourself, this repo is public. It's github.com/snyklabs/Node.js goof. In fact, I'll get the link real quick to drop in the chat.
Such an outdated like repo in the Docker compose file that it doesn't have the ARM chip set up. Is that what you're running into
now?
Yeah.
Here's the drop that in there.
Oh, you got the link in there? Okay, perfect. I was going to put it in the private chat that you can all share it if you'd like to. Yeah, perfect.
Share it away. I'll update it in our links for the post blog
so then,
as well.
That way, folks watching, they can pull down that repo, and then there's the exploits folder, which kind of talks through a lot of the potential vulnerabilities that are available or presented in the application itself. And the one I tend to go through the most is that marked one.
This one here?
Yeah, that one shows a cross-site scripting vulnerability in there. So unless it sounds like you weren't able to get it running through Docker either then, huh?
I could not run the compose because of the ARM issue. So those are always fun to figure out.
Well, it probably needs some plugin or something to make the ARM chip. Something has to be updated. That's what I was going to say is like this shows the importance of like keeping your app up to date as you go and not trying to do all of these at one time, because it's not an easy fix to just upgrade and be done with it. Like there are going to be other things you have to go back and change and fix. And lots of other issues along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this is all surrounding the fact that I'm running on a ARM chip, so the Apple M series or whatever we want to call them.
Yep.
So yeah.
Okay.
Cool. How about so like we've done some app things, and maybe you might want to show this instead of me, but like on Snyk itself, like out in the actual browser, is there stuff we should show developers out there as well for tracking issues and things?
We can do that, but before we go that route, I would like to, because we've been mostly focusing on like vulnerabilities in the code that you might write in your application. We haven't really touched upon the open source side of things.
Right. So I keep forgetting. Okay.
Yeah, no worries. So one way you can do that is in the Snyk VS Code extension view, if you collapse the code security one and open up the open source security, this is where it looks at your package JSON in this case, but if you're using other programming languages, those are supported too. And now you can see, all right, based on what you're depending upon in your project, what are the vulnerabilities that those open source packages are introducing or bringing into it? And this is something that was very eye-opening to me, because again, you're in that mindset of like tunnel vision, my code, what's the security? And you don't think that your code actually relies on other people's lines of code,
Yeah.
right? So you think the lines of code is like this small, but it's really like huge compared to that, right? Like this huge sphere surface area of code that could potentially be vulnerable, right?
Yeah, and I guess for me, like we saw it at some point up here. Like the only time I ever look, yeah, right here is when I install. Like that's literally if it's got anything red, like I'm making sure those are updated. That's first. But
Right. And so with this, what's nice is a couple things. Well, when you're looking in your package JSON, maybe you're modifying things, modifying scripts, the VS Code extension is telling you, like right on line 18, for instance, that ADM-zip, that has 2 vulnerabilities in it. And like one of them is critical. You can close that sash on the right, or that you see all that right there. Boom. All those red little annotations in your face to tell you, again, this one's intentionally, it's an exaggeration. Although there's definitely projects out there that are running in production probably like this.
100%.
But it gives you an idea of how that can alert you as a developer right at this point in time when you're building these things out in your editor. You get that information right away, so you can prevent that from going really hurting you in the long run. So that's open source vulnerabilities there. And again, just like we saw before with Snyk code and like what's wrong with your code and the vulnerabilities there, you can find out more information for each of these and why and how do you address them. Now, the nice thing about this usually is you just have to go to the patch version.
Right.
So if you go to, let's look at on line 35, that marked library, we're using version 0.3.5. And I think even if you hit that little light bulb, it should show you open description of that. Yeah, there you go. That's the quick way. Should have remembered that from earlier. That should open up a... So this is the Snyk vulnerability database, which is what's sourced for Snyk to be able to, when it scans your project, it uses that as the source of information of like what to report on. And so again, this is similar information that we saw before, but it's on through the Snyk's website instead of in your editor, which I prefer personally because again, the context switching adds up over time.
Sure. Yeah.
But you get that information and you can dive deeper into the Snyk atmosphere on the website a bit more if you want with that.
How is like the Snyk database like collating this, like as they appear in repos, or like how does this get populated?
Yeah, so Snyk uses a number of different things. There's ones where our security research team is finding and reporting these things.
Okay.
There's community-based ones. So like if you scroll to the bottom of this, you'll see the relative references. So like the GitHub commit, GitHub PR, where people reported that on for that open source library, that type of thing.
Wow.
So it's very community. So they're listening to that, listening to social media posts to see what people are publicizing about different things that other security researchers are finding, that type of thing. And then we have a means where people can report vulnerabilities to Snyk to get added into the database as well. So there's a lot of different avenues of sources for vulnerabilities to be ingested into Snyk basically, and then reported out through our tooling.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And the dog has like a mask on in this one or something.
Yeah.
Sorry, I get so obsessed with the logo.
I do too. I'm right there with you.
Okay, cool. So for most people, you'd probably go through each one of these. If you're a developer like me, I would just massively update everything and then deal with all the code it broke. So I really want to do that.
So let's focus on that marked one still, right? And so the reason why you don't want to go that route where you just mass update everything is you don't know what that's going to break, and it's going to be even harder to revert. So while Snyk does offer the capabilities of like opening up a PR against your repository for you to patch all of these things and upgrade you to the right version to fix all of them, I recommend doing them piecemeal so that I mean, it's just general best practice, right? I mean, I don't always follow it. So I'm not knocking you, Alex, for that being the case. But
just my personal stuff. Let's just be clear.
Yeah, just breaking up your changes and like associating each one to a PR and being able to see what was changed for each one. So you could revert them easily if you needed to.
Spot on. Yeah. Exactly. So let's look at the marked one, right? So if you hover over that one, then they'll get the click into there, get the cursor there, so the light bulb pops up in the well, and then click on that top one. Or wait. that top one opened up your browser before, right? So one of them should open it up as like a new tab.
That one
maybe.
got learned. Let's see.
Description?
In browser.
That third one?
They're all in browser.
Maybe. Yeah, they just keep popping open the browser over here.
They should open up in that new tab there. Well, all right. So in the Snyk extension view on the left-hand side there, you can look for the marked library in that one. It should be alphabetically, essentially. Yeah, and there you go. So one of these, for most of them, so the marked library here, if we were able to get the application running on your machine, it's a to-do app. And the idea is we have developers that are using this to-do app, and they want to write their to-do items in Markdown and render them on the web page. And so this marked library does that, where you can use Markdown syntax, and then it gets rendered out to the proper HTML for that. But in this particular version of Marked, you can introduce certain payloads as part of your to-do item that will get you out of the context of HTML and allow you to execute any JavaScript code. And so we want to prevent that from happening. And that's actually described in that overview area there. And if somebody wants to go through the exploits if you do get it running locally, that type of thing, you can try this out yourself, where you put in that payload of JavaScript ampersand, and it looks like this hacker code, but it's really just the HTML encoded symbols of characters, so that you can bypass some of it. Because here's the thing, even if you take note there, it says sanitize true. The marked library, actually, Alex, if you quickly use the keyboard, you're on Mac, so Command Shift F, and then search for marked in there, and that should bring us to the code, the set options one. So it's the third from the top there. So in this case, we as developers set up the application so where we typically require a library, and then we looked at the application or the library's options, and it says set options. And then there's a sanitized one that says that's a security flag I turned on. So I'm thinking I'm doing the right thing, taking steps in the right direction. And yet this open source library is still vulnerable, even with that security measure in place. So, and the more that weeds into that on why that's capable or why that's happening is described in the overview and the details there. And you can try that out when you get the app running. But anyway, I want to point that out because a lot of times we as developers just npm install, don't look at the options for it, right? But even in this case, when you do take that extra step to try and be secure, you're in that secure mindset, you can still be bitten by this stuff. So just a heads up on that. So it goes into detail of what cross-site scripting is, why it's important, that type of thing. I would love to show that a bit further. I don't have it set up on my machine. This one that I'm joining
also the hope that we're not requiring anything and that we're importing everything. If you're writing code today, please don't use require.
True. Yes, this is very old.
The CommonJS
bar in there too.
Script module is the biggest pain in my butt, and
this is this commit was 4 years ago, so yeah, it's a little out there.
Yes, I mean there's var, there's var and const being used in there too, so there's something to call out there in terms of how old it is.
I guarantee someone, so they put this in probably 5 years ago, and then someone came through correctly putting const 3 years ago. So there you go.
Needless to say, we do need to update it to some degree, but we kind of don't want to because we want it to be vulnerable. You get the idea.
I guarantee there's production code that looks just like this. So
absolutely.
So now here's the important part, right? We know that this is a problem. Maybe as developers, we're like, we don't have time to dive deep into why this is a problem or how I can be exploited in my app for it. I just want to fix it, right? And right at the top, it says remediation, upgrade to marked 0.3.6. So in that case, it's a patch version, right? So we can, to some level of confidence, know that it's not going to have a negative impact and be a breaking change. Typically speaking, right? There's exceptions to that, but if it's always properly following semantic versioning, then we can expect that. And that way we can bump that up, run it in our CI/CD pipeline, make sure everything, the tests are passing, whatever it may be, try it out in a running environment and see if that upgrade to that patch is working as expected still, and it's fixing that security vulnerability that's introduced in the previous version of that library.
So theoretically, if we go 0.3.6, I hit save. I can't type and talk at the same time, apparently. Oh my gosh. There we go.
You will need to run npm install because it's going to look at
theoretically, we'll see.
We probably should have taken note of how many vulnerabilities were there. but that one
I
should
feel
be
like
gone.
111 were the same. That's the same number we had the first time.
That is interesting, isn't it? I'm kind of wondering what did I not save? Is that the problem?
Oh yeah, you don't have it saved.
Let's try that again.
111.
Let's do.
Well, keep in
August.
mind the 111 that's being reported in the command line is from npm and not from Snyk.
Yeah.
So if we take a look at Snyk again, let's see what it marked. So marked 3.6 has an issue. It's fixed in 3.7. It'd be kind of interesting to see like how far to go with it, kind of. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So would you typically, if you're running into this, would you go patch by patch, or would you say what is the most current version of marked and try it that way?
Yeah, I would go that route. But again, at the same time, you also want to be careful of balancing like
Right.
what you're introducing that might be a potential breaking change to the product,
Yep.
right? Because like marked is up to like version 4 or something like that at this point, and this is
Yeah.
super old. Right?
I
Yeah.
might look at like breaking changes, look at the next major version.
Yeah, see, and that's where like if I'm doing this, I would actually go part by part. So I go to marked, I'd say update it to latest and go fix all the issues surrounding it. And that's the way I've always done it. I don't know why, but like that takes time too. So
Well, that would probably be fine if you did it like one package at a time, but you
Right.
can't just like update everything to the latest and expect that to work every time.
that's
Right.
that's what, throwing the baby out with the bathwater or whatever. Like, "Ugh, here we
I don't
go.
think I've
Let's
ever-
rewrite it.
I don't think I've ever heard that expression before, but that's funny.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, all kinds of good stuff. Okay, so that's kind of how to find them. Learning more, how to update them. We got a couple comments that we should probably address here. B1 says logo reminds me of my old favorite security WordPress plugin Cerberus. Does it happen to be the same company? My guess is we're surrounding security, so that's like a Hades dog thing, if I remember my mythology right. So it's probably a little bit of a tie in there.
That's the three-headed dog, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
I don't know for sure in that regard to be if I can answer that as well. I'm not familiar with how they came up with the whole logo and everything like
This
that.
is like a Doberman, though. I don't know. We'll
Yeah,
see.
yeah. It is based off of Doberman, and his name is Patch. So
I like that. I didn't even know that was the name. That's perfect.
yeah.
Okay, so with all of that said, where do you think we should head next, Brian?
Well, so let's go into what you were talking about where, all right, how do I get maybe a more holistic view? And this is where I think you could still drive in this case where, because you have a Snyk account, you can go into your app.snyk.io on the website and you
Okay.
can get a bit different of a view of how everything's working here. So this is where your dashboard is. And so maybe you have folks on the team that aren't working in these in some type of development environment and but they still want to manage the security aspect of the projects or see how things are trending, that type of thing. That's where the like UI can come into play. I use it oftentimes too to get Snyk to just open up PRs against my repositories
Nice.
automatically for me so that I don't have to manually be doing that for projects that are like maybe I'm done. Like again, I'm talking about my open source projects where I'm not really actively developing on it right now, or I haven't in several months, but I could see these PRs are updating through Snyk that's automatically doing that for me so I'm not falling too far behind, that type of thing. So that's where like if you click on you're in the dashboard view right now, you can also go to your projects view. And then you expand that project that you have imported through there. And so for folks that maybe aren't familiar, I imagine this is how you went through it, Alex, where you went to the top right-hand corner and you imported the project. I think if you scroll up actually a little bit more, that add projects there. Oops.
Oops. There we go.
Yes, and you connected your GitHub account, I'm assuming.
Yep.
And
It'll
then
probably
that
offer some more up here.
yes. And so then it'll look at all that you have access to on your GitHub account when you went through the whole OAuth flow and you choose which projects you want to import there. You just check it and then you would say import. And you can do multiple at a time there.
Nice.
So that's just a quick example. So if people that are maybe just starting out are like, where's my project? Why am I not seeing it there? You choose what you want Snyk to have access to and look at. So in this case, you've done that for CodingCat, and now you can look at a high level. If you expand that, it shows you all the different aspects of your project. Now, what's different here now we're noticing, because before you just had the low, but now you have some medium and high. And so what's kind of different is with the web through the web app, it's looking at all of the projects in the repo, whereas with Snyk Code or Snyk VS Code, you have to kind of turn that on. There's a flag in the extension settings that say, hey, look at all the projects that are part of this whole thing and not just the one contained within this folder structure right
I
here.
was going to ask you about the whole mono repo setup, so that makes sense.
Yes. So if you want to really quick, this is a great point to like check that out for other folks that probably will run into this, because I use mono repos in some cases too. If you bring up this settings view, so if you do command comma is the shortcut on VS Code, and then search for Snyk, and you'll see additional parameters. So in that view there, that little input box, you can do -- all - projects. You save that. It should trigger Snyk to do like another test or so, potentially. Maybe, maybe not. You might have to, yeah, do that. Well, you're also still, is this in your project again? No,
No,
switch back to your
gee, thank
coding
you.
cat
Sorry.
one, right? Yeah,
Did I do that top level then?
it should be. Yeah,
That works.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. All right, see if it'll run another scan for you. There we go. Now it's showing all of those. So instead of just the low, you have some of the high and medium ones to take a look at there for it. And these are your open source dependencies. So that version of Axios, you might want to take a look at that and so forth, right?
Yep. This is great.
Yep.
The funny thing is, like, there's packages out here that we don't even actually use the stuff in the package. So definitely a good eye to keep on cleanup as well.
Yeah. All right. So let's go back over to the website. And so what you can do is if you click on one of those particular, like the first package JSON there, this in a similar fashion, you're able to see all the vulnerabilities that are being reported on the project, more details about it. But it's a little bit more visible, I think. And this is where like our VS Code extension is being iterated on, and there's definitely a big focus for this year to improve the developer experience, so that it can have a little bit more parity to what you get in some of the other areas of Snyk. So if you click on like maybe that protobuf one or the dicer one, and you do show more details, it's kind of hidden a little bit there.
Sure. There.
Right there, yeah. And this is where it gives you a little bit clearer view of like, okay, it's introduced through this version, and if you can fix it by upgrading to Firebase Admin 10.3, which is a
Cool.
significant change for you because that's a major
Yep.
version. That's showing you, I think, the one that will encompass it all to fix all the problems that are for all versions between
Nice.
the one that you have in there, the latest one, as an example. Then the other option you have here is instead of you manually going and changing in your package JSON that you were already trying to do it before, the fix this vulnerability green button in the bottom right, you click on that. And don't worry, it's not going to actually do anything just yet. You get to choose when that happens. This is where I was getting into. Do this piecemeal. I kind of don't like that Snyk does this because it kind of entices you as a user of this to be like, hey, well, I'll just check it all, and then open up a PR for all of them, right? Just leave that one checked. You scroll to the bottom and you say open a fix PR. And so what it's going to do is, since this is GitHub, it's going to go out to GitHub, set up the PR that does that fix for you. And that was pretty quick too. I thought I was going to have to talk through that.
This is
And
such a nice feature.
It's
yes.
nice that it like prefaces it too and where it came from.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep. It also does like its own branch, so it creates like a Snyk prefix branch for you, so that you know that it's not going to interfere with some of your other maybe branching conventions that you might be using. And then you can review that. You pull that branch down, run it locally, make sure it's all working, and then decide to go through whatever typical review process you have before merging it into the main branch that you might have.
Cool.
What did it change? Can you look at the changes?
Yes.
So it just updated and it didn't do the lock file. So I bet that's why the Vercel deployment is failing.
I would imagine.
So it just changed the package.
Yes.
Because it upgraded Firebase Admin, it's probably going to fail all over the place because there's some significant changes between 9 and 10.
Yeah.
I'm just noticing, and I should have asked this before, but when I gave Snyk access, it actually has, I can't remember what these are called, bots, whatever these things are, where they automatically run. So is this actually in a preventative mode right now, where if a security vulnerability came through in our PRs, it's all set up and it'll block it?
I'll say yes, like tentatively, because it's based on how you set up the repo, right? Like if you have those checks, the PR checks, or that repository configured in GitHub to, like right now you have merging blocks. So if Snyk did show an X, like the Vercel ones show,
Mhm.
and then that button would continue to stay, disabled like it is right now.
Okay.
But being that it has the green check, it means it passed. You're good to go. You can.
And are we setting that up in Snyk where it does that? Like, I want it to have X amount of coverage, or how does that setup work?
So yes, you can set it up in the Snyk UI that we were just on the website.
Okay.
Where if you go into the project, and in this case, that the 3 dots that you were clicking on earlier, I think you go to project. All right, maybe open up the project. Actually, sorry, I don't
Okay.
remember where it is. And that package JSON again.
Just this.
Project settings. There you go. Yep. You can choose one, like how often you want that to be tested automatically by Snyk behind the scenes. That's what that second one is there. And then I think it's under GitHub integration. This is where you can start choosing, like, all right, do you want Snyk to automatically open up fixed pull requests for you? That's that second one there. Do you want to run Snyk tests for pull requests? All this is, and you can set it more globally. That's where you see where it's saying like inherited from integration settings. So if you went
nice.
to that, then you can
Okay.
say, okay, for all of my GitHub projects that I import into Snyk, this is how I want Snyk to behave and process these, right?
Gotcha. Okay, that's really cool.
Yep. There's
Love
a
it.
lot of options there that you can set up. It takes advantage of the controls that GitHub offers, or any source control management offers to you for your projects.
Cool. Is there anything I'm missing out in the like dashboard area we haven't talked about?
I think that mostly covers it, at least to the extent that I personally, that's what I like try to talk to the most part, is like what I personally use, because
Yeah.
I don't want to steer anybody in the, again, I want to be man, what's the word I'm looking for? True to the sense of like how I use it. What's that?
Non-biased.
Yeah, exactly. I don't wanna be like, "Oh, I'm just trying to sell you on this." Like, use Snyk, don't use it. I want you to be successful in what you're doing as a developer, and that's what matters to me, and I want you to do it safely and securely. That's my motivation, because that's
Nice.
how I started, So,
Yeah, for sure. I'm wondering if there's anything else. I think we covered quite a bit of it. I think the GitHub integration or whatever Git management tool you're kind of running is pretty powerful along these lines. I think where you see this, or where I've been seeing Snyk a lot, is on open source projects. When you put a PR in, it's running those vulnerabilities and things like that and checking them. Is there any other areas that you know of that you've seen kind of in the wild where it's really been a huge success?
yeah, I mean, well, a couple things that come to mind that we don't need to go into demoing or showing is like the GitHub Action stuff that we were talking about before. If you set up a pipeline beyond just the PR checks, like maybe something does make it into the main branch and then that does try to do a deploy, you can have it stop from there too, like to make sure it doesn't get deployed to that environment if the Snyk check doesn't, because maybe you don't have that control on the PRs. Maybe somebody forces a merge, right? That type of thing. You can have Snyk check again at different layers throughout the
Oh,
development lifecycle, right?
yeah, that makes
Um,
sense.
so that's very important to call out. And then like sometimes, maybe things aren't like in any security tool, from my experience, there's going to be cases where things are being reported to you, but it's actually you maybe you investigate it further, you research it, you try it out, and you're like, this doesn't actually impact my code. You can ignore that stuff. And there's different ways, different approaches to different ways to skin that cat. But where you can tell Snyk, ignore
No.
this. I don't care about that, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. So the easiest way to get started is kind of what we walked through today. Would you suggest, like, hey, try out the VS Code plugin? Most of our viewers are using VS Code. Just try that out and kind of see how it goes, or would you recommend like drop it right in a repo and get running from there?
Um, So again, this is me being honest and transparent. I'm happy with our VS Code extension, but it can be quite noisy in terms of
Okay.
notifications that it pops up and that type of thing. Not what we saw today. Like that stuff is not bad to me. there's some things that they're working on right now where it's like it could be a log, like an extension log behind the scenes that they need to do. So I would say yes, use the extension, but now this is actually great. VS Code in a recent release added the capability of muting notifications from extensions, so you can just don't tell work that I said to do this, but you can mute the notifications for the Snyk extension and still get the benefit of the security aspects of it because it alerts you like because the way the extension's driven, actually, this is one last thing to call out. If you're more CLI driven, there's a Snyk CLI tool, and that's how the extension actually works and is powered behind the scenes through the Snyk CLI. But one of the things that the extension does is it like alerts you that it's downloading the new version of the CLI, and I'm like, I don't need that to be a pop-up notification in VS Code to tell me that every time I open up VS Code. Like, just do it behind the scenes. I don't care.
Yeah,
Stuff
sure.
like that. So yeah, check out the extension if you're more command line driven. The Snyk CLI tool has everything capable that we just went through and more through the command line. If you'd like to check that out,
If you're some of these folks like writing IAC and building out containers and things like that, is that typically the same kind of flow? Like you're writing your IAC code, you might have issues, it's going to pop up in VS Code, but like you go to push as it's building that container. Is there like kind of like a pre and post check that occurs there as well that you can put in your pipeline?
So there's a lot packed into that what you just said. So
Yeah,
when it comes
sorry.
to infrastructure as code, the extension does alert you in the same way that you see it alert about open source problems or code problems.
Okay.
The container side of things, it doesn't do that in the extension, and that's where you lean more on the CLI tool. But to answer the latter half of that project, yes, you can, in the same way that we have checks for your code and open source vulnerabilities, you can implement those in your pipelines or in your normal PR process for container and infrastructure as code stuff. Where I've used, because I'm still like I'm starting to use dev containers a bit more so that I don't
Oh,
have to pollute like my environment that
yeah,
much with like installing all this stuff or different runtimes because I'm jumping between Python and Node.js a little bit here and there. So I'm learning a bit more about that. And the way I would test that is I'm using the CLI. You do Snyk container test, like Snyk space container space test. It will then check your base image, for instance. That's something we could have gone into, but time permitting, and maybe another time we can go into that. Or
yeah.
have our buddy that used to be a colleague of mine, Eric Smalling, who's fantastic when it comes to container security. He should be on your show to talk a little bit more about how to approach that.
For sure. That would be awesome. Yeah, let's
Yep.
set that up. Cool. Anything I missed? Anything you want to shout out? How to get that swag? Anything like that?
Well, if somebody knows how to get that swag, let me know because I can't wait for us to open up a merch store. In fact, the funny story about that, a colleague of mine that's been at the company longer had some swag, like extra swag, and he shipped it to me at the kindness of his heart because he
That's
knows
awesome.
how into the branding and swag I am. That I was like, oh, thank you.
Yeah, and at the AWS reInvent is kind of where I, ran into the Snyk team, and they were spray painting things. So it was one of the coolest booths that was at reInvent. It was capturing crowds like crazy. So you guys are doing something right in the marketing / DevRel team of sorts.
Yeah, I've been very impressed with our marketing team. One of the things that they did, I think about a year or so ago, as like a campaign, is being that our logo is a dog. It's a Doberman. They went into we had a big event going on. I think it was in Boston, and they went into like some dog parks around the area and dropped like a bunch of Snyk branded like tennis balls in there with like a note in the basket of like, hey, if you want to check out security, that type of thing. It's
That's really
super
cool.
creative and yeah. Big shout out to
Need
the marketing team at Snyk.
need to like host a adopt a dog event or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice. Well, thank you so much, Bryan, for coming on, showing us all around Snyk. I think it's super powerful. Keep all those security bugs out of your code, and we'll have to catch up with you again next time.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Of course. See you again.